The howl pierced the darkness like a knife, sending a chill down Olivia Parker's spine as she hurried along the moonlit path toward her family's homestead on the outskirts of Verde, Nevada. The year was 1878, and the silver mining boom had transformed this once quiet corner of the Sierra Nevada foothills into a bustling frontier town. But out here, beyond the glow of town lanterns, nature still ruled with tooth and claw. Olivia clutched her shawl tighter around her shoulders, cursing herself for staying so late at the schoolhouse where she taught. The leather satchel filled with student essays weighed heavy in her hand as another howl, closer this time, caused her steps to falter. At 22, she'd grown up with tales of wolf packs that roamed these mountains, but tonight was the first time she truly felt hunted. A twig snapped in the darkness to her left, then another to her right. Her breath caught as she spotted them, three gray shadows with gleaming eyes moving between the pines, their movements fluid and purposeful. Wolves, not just passing by but stalking her with deliberate intent. Olivia quickened her pace, her heart hammering against her ribs. The homestead was still a quarter-mile ahead. Too far. The wolves were closing in, emboldened by hunger after the harsh winter that had only recently released its grip on the land. She broke into a run, but her long skirts hampered her movement. Behind her, the padding of paws grew louder. A snarl rippled through the night air. Olivia stumbled on a rock, nearly falling, and in that moment of vulnerability she heard the wolves lunge. The crack of a rifle split the night. Then another shot. And another. The nearest wolf yelped and fell, while its companions scattered into the darkness. "Don't move, miss," a deep voice commanded from the trees. Olivia froze, trembling as a tall figure emerged from the shadows, rifle still raised, scanning for any remaining threat. He stepped into a patch of moonlight, revealing a face weathered by sun and wind beneath the brim of a wide-brimmed hat. His duster coat hung open, showing a faded blue shirt and a gun belt slung low on his hips. "You're a fair piece from town to be walking alone after dark," the stranger said, lowering his rifle as he approached. "These mountains belong to the wolves once the sun goes down." I'm aware," Olivia managed, finding her voice. "I'm the school teacher. I stayed late grading papers and didn't realize how quickly night had fallen." The man nodded, his eyes still scanning the tree line. "Garrett Zimmerman," he offered simply. "Just rode in from Montana Territory." He whistled low, and from the shadows emerged a magnificent black horse. "Olivia Parker," she replied, extending a trembling hand. "I'm grateful for your intervention, Mr. Zimmerman." He took her hand briefly, his palm rough with calluses. "Just doing what needed doing. Those wolves looked half-starved, makes them dangerous." He glanced at the dead wolf, then back to the path ahead. "Your home nearby, just beyond that ridge." "My father's homestead," Garrett nodded. "I'll see you there safely. These parts aren't safe for a woman alone, especially with hungry predators about." Under normal circumstances, Olivia would have bristled at the suggestion she needed a man's protection. But the memory of those gleaming wolf eyes was still too fresh, the sound of their hungry snarls too vivid in her mind. "Thank you," she said softly, accepting his assistance with genuine gratitude. As they walked side by side, his horse following behind, Olivia stole glances at her rescuer. He moved with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to dangerous situations, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. There was something compelling about him, not just his timely rescue, but something in the quiet strength he projected. "What brings you to Verde, Mr. Zimmerman?" she asked, breaking the silence. "Work," he answered simply. "Heard the Silver Baron Ranch was hiring experienced hands. Thought I'd try my luck. Mr. Harrison's place. It's the largest in the county. My father delivers lumber there for their expansion." Garrett nodded, seemingly more comfortable listening than talking. As they crested the ridge, the lights of the Parker homestead came into view, a sturdy two-story house with a smaller barn and workshop nearby, nestled in a clearing surrounded by tall pines. "That's home," Olivia said with relief. "I can make it from here if you—" "I'll see you to your door," Garrett interrupted firmly. "Job's not done until you're safe inside." As they approached, the front door swung open. A broad-shouldered man with graying hair and a thick beard stepped onto the porch, a shotgun in his hands. "Olivia." "That you?" he called, his voice tight with worry. "You're late." "It's me, Papa," she called back. "I have company." Thomas Parker lowered his shotgun slightly as they reached the yard, his eyes narrowed suspiciously at Garrett. "Who's this?" "Garrett Zimmerman, sir," the cowboy said, touching the brim of his hat respectfully. "Your daughter was set upon by wolves on her way home. I happened to be riding by." Thomas's expression immediately shifted from suspicion to concern. "Wolves? Olivia, are you hurt?" "I'm fine, Papa," she assured him, climbing the porch steps. "Mr. Zimmerman's rifle spoke before they could touch me." Thomas extended a weathered hand to Garrett. "Then I owe you my thanks, Mr. Zimmerman. Please come inside. The least we can offer is a hot meal and coffee." Garrett hesitated, glancing at his horse. "I should get on to town, find lodging before it gets any later." "Nonsense," Thomas insisted. "We've got a spare room above the workshop. It's simple but warm and dry. No sense riding all the way to town in the dark." Olivia found herself hoping he would accept. There was something about this quiet stranger that intrigued her, something beyond the fact that he'd saved her life. After a moment's consideration, Garrett nodded. "That's mighty generous. Thank you." Inside the warm kitchen, Olivia's mother Martha fussed over her daughter while casting curious glances at their unexpected guest. Olivia's younger brother Samuel, 16 and full of questions, wanted to hear every detail about the wolf encounter. "How many did you shoot?" Samuel asked Garrett eagerly as they sat around the kitchen table. "Just one," Garrett replied, accepting a steaming cup of coffee from Martha. "The others ran off." "Sam, let the man eat in peace," Thomas admonished, though his own expression showed he was equally curious about their visitor. Over a simple but hearty meal of venison stew and fresh bread, they learned that Garrett had spent the last 5 years working cattle ranches throughout Montana and Wyoming. Before that, he'd fought in the war, though he didn't specify which side, and afterward had drifted west like so many other men looking to leave the past behind. "And what of family, Mr. Zimmerman?" Martha asked, her motherly instinct for matchmaking not lost on Olivia, who felt her cheeks warm. "None to speak of, madam," he answered quietly. "Lost my parents young, been on my own since I was 16. The conversation shifted to local matters, the expansion of the Silver Baron Ranch, the new mining operations opening up, and the growing tensions between cattle ranchers and the remaining Paiute people, who had ancestral claims to much of the land. Later, as Thomas showed Garrett to the room above the workshop, Olivia helped her mother clear the table. "He seems a decent sort," Martha commented with calculated casualness. "Handsome, too, in that rugged way." "Mother," Olivia warned, though she couldn't entirely disagree. There was something compelling about Garrett Zimmerman, beyond his timely rescue. A depth to his quiet manner that suggested experiences and stories untold. That night, as Olivia lay in bed, she found her thoughts returning to the moment when the wolves had closed in, and the stranger who had appeared like something from a dime novel to save her. But unlike the fictional heroes in those stories, Garrett Zimmerman seemed to carry real weight to his presence. Real shadows behind his eyes. Outside, a lone wolf howled in the distance, reminding her how differently this night might have ended without his intervention. Morning brought clear skies and the promise of spring warmth. Olivia woke early, as was her habit on school days. She dressed in one of her simple teaching dresses, dark blue with small white buttons, and pinned her chestnut hair in a neat bun before heading downstairs. To her surprise, she found Garrett already in the kitchen, sharing coffee with her father. Both men stood as she entered. "Good morning," she greeted them, trying to ignore the flutter in her stomach at seeing her rescuer in the morning light. He looked different without his duster and hat, younger somehow, though still with that weathered quality that spoke of a life lived outdoors. "Mr. Zimmerman was just telling me about his experience breaking horses," Thomas explained. "Seems he has quite the way with difficult animals." Garrett shrugged modestly. "Just patience and respect. Animals know when you're afraid or when you're trying to dominate them. Show them partnership instead, and most will come around." Olivia found herself wondering if the same philosophy applied to people in his mind. "Will you be heading to the Silver Baron today?" she asked, accepting a cup of coffee from her mother. "That's my plan," he confirmed, "though your father has kindly offered me work helping with some timber cutting first to earn my keep." "Nonsense," Thomas waved off the suggestion. "You saved my daughter. A bed and meals are the least we can offer." "I prefer to earn my way, sir," Garrett said firmly but respectfully. Thomas studied him for a moment, then nodded. "A man who values honest work. I respect that." "Very well. I could use help loading the wagon this morning before you head to the ranch." After breakfast, Olivia prepared for her walk to the schoolhouse, gathering her teaching materials. As she stepped onto the porch, she found Garrett waiting beside his saddled horse. "I thought I might ride alongside you to town," he said, his voice carrying just a hint of uncertainty that seemed at odds with his otherwise confident demeanor. "In case those wolves are still about." Olivia felt a smile tug at her lips. "That would be most appreciated, Mr. Zimmerman." As they made their way toward town, Olivia walking while Garrett rode slowly beside her, the morning sun painted the landscape with golden light. The path that had seemed so threatening in darkness now appeared peaceful and beautiful. "Have you been teaching long?" Garrett asked, breaking the comfortable silence between them. 3 years now," she replied. "I started when I was 19 after completing my own education in Sacramento. Verdi needed a teacher and I wanted to return home." "Most young women would be married with children by your age," he observed, though his tone held no judgment. Olivia raised an eyebrow. "I'm not most young women, Mr. Zimmerman. I believe in education and independence. Marriage can wait until I find someone who values those qualities in a wife." A faint smile touched his lips. "Fair enough. And you?" she asked. "Most men your age would be settled somewhere with a homestead or a business." "Also not most men," he replied, though his expression suggested there was more to the story than he was willing to share. "I go where the work is. Keeps life interesting." They reached the outskirts of Verdi, where the path widened into a proper dirt road lined with buildings. The town had grown considerably since silver had been discovered nearby 5 years earlier. What had once been little more than a stagecoach stop now boasted several saloons, a hotel, general store, blacksmith, and other businesses catering to miners and ranchers. "The schoolhouse is just there." Olivia pointed to a white clapboard building at the end of the street. "Thank you for the escort, Mr. Zimmerman." He tipped his hat. "My pleasure, Miss Parker." For a moment neither moved, as though there was something more to be said. Then the school bell rang and the spell broke. "I should go," Olivia said, suddenly aware of curious glances from townspeople passing by. A young, unmarried schoolteacher was always subject to scrutiny in a small community like Verdi. "Good luck at the Silver Baron." Thank you. Perhaps I'll see you around town. Olivia nodded, finding herself hoping that would indeed be the case. As she turned toward the schoolhouse, she couldn't help wondering what had brought this mysterious cowboy to their remote corner of Nevada, and why she couldn't seem to get him out of her thoughts. Throughout the day, as Olivia taught her students 20 children ranging from 6 to 16 years of age, her mind occasionally wandered to Garrett Zimmerman. There was something in his manner that suggested he was running from something, or perhaps toward something. She recognized in him a restlessness that seemed at odds with his calm exterior. When school dismissed for the day, Olivia was surprised to find Garrett waiting outside, leaning against the hitching post with his hat tipped low over his eyes. "Mr. Zimmerman," she greeted him, unable to keep the pleasure from her voice. "I didn't expect to see you here." He straightened, adjusting his hat. "Your father mentioned you'd be done at 3. Thought you might appreciate company on the walk home." Several of her students giggled and whispered as they passed, clearly intrigued by the tall stranger speaking with their teacher. "That's very thoughtful," Olivia said, feeling a warmth in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. "I would welcome the company." As they walked, Garrett told her about his visit to the Silver Baron Ranch. "Mr. Harrison offered me work starting next week. They're expanding their operation, driving a new herd up from Arizona Territory." "That's wonderful news," Olivia said sincerely. "The Silver Baron is the most prosperous ranch in the county. Mr. Harrison is known as a fair employer. Your father also offered me continued lodging in exchange for help with his lumber business on my days off," Garrett added. "If that meets with your approval, of course." Olivia glanced at him, surprised. "My approval? It's my father's business and home." "Yes, but you're the one who was followed home by a strange man with a rifle," he pointed out with a hint of a smile. "Might make for uncomfortable breakfasts." She couldn't help laughing. "I think I've determined you're not a threat, Mr. Zimmerman, at least not to my family." "Just to wolves," he agreed, his expression turning more serious. "Speaking of which, I rode out earlier to where we encountered them, tracked the pack a ways. They've been denning in the foothills north of town." "Is that unusual, this close to settlements?" "Yes, and they're desperate, thin, hungry. The winter was hard on game, makes them bold enough to consider humans as prey." Olivia shivered despite the warm afternoon. "Will they come back?" "Possibly. I mentioned it to the sheriff in town. He's organizing some men to hunt them down before they attack someone else." They walked in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds their footsteps and the occasional call of a bird. Olivia found herself studying Garrett's profile when he wasn't looking, the strong line of his jaw, the small scar near his right eye. "How did you get that scar?" she asked impulsively. His hand went to his face, fingers brushing the mark almost self-consciously. "Bar fight in Cheyenne. Man didn't appreciate losing at cards." "You gamble?" she asked, unable to keep a note of disapproval from her voice. "Used to," he corrected. "Found it wasn't worth the trouble it brought. Prefer honest work these days." They had reached the point where the town path met the trail leading to the Parker homestead. Ahead, they could see Thomas's wagon returning, loaded with fresh-cut timber. "Olivia," Garrett said suddenly, his voice lower. "I should tell you something before I continue accepting your family's hospitality." She stopped, turning to face him. "What is it?" He seemed to struggle with his words, his eyes meeting hers then looking away. "I wasn't just passing by last night when I heard the wolves. I'd been watching your house earlier in the day, trying to work up the nerve to approach your father about work." "You were watching our home." Olivia took a step back, her earlier comfort giving way to wariness. "Not in a sinister way," he hastened to clarify. "I'd asked in town about who might be hiring. Several people mentioned your father's lumber operation. I rode out there, but when I saw how settled everything looked, I hesitated. Wasn't sure if a drifter like me would be welcome. So instead you followed me." "No," he shook his head firmly. "I was heading back to town when I heard the wolves. Then I saw you on the path." He paused. "I just didn't want there to be any deception between us. Your family has been kind to me." Olivia studied his face, looking for any sign of dishonesty. Finding none, she nodded slowly. "I appreciate your honesty, Mr. Zimmerman, though perhaps you should share this with my father as well." "I intend to," he agreed, looking relieved at her response. Thomas's wagon approached, and he reined the horses to a stop beside them. "Afternoon, Olivia Zimmerman. Good day at school." "Yes, Papa," Olivia smiled. "And Mr. Zimmerman was kind enough to escort me home again." Thomas nodded approvingly. "Good man. I was just heading back to unload this timber. Care to lend a hand, Zimmerman? I pay fair wages for fair work." "I'd be obliged," Garrett replied. He turned to Olivia. "Miss Parker." "Mr. Zimmerman," she acknowledged with a slight nod, finding herself reluctant to end their conversation. As the wagon continued toward home with Garrett walking alongside, Olivia followed at a slower pace, lost in thought. There was something about Garrett Zimmerman that both intrigued and unsettled her. He was clearly a man with secrets, but then, who wasn't? The West was full of people reinventing themselves, running from pasts both shameful and tragic. Over the next 2 weeks, Garrett became a fixture at the Parker homestead. He split his time between working at the Silver Baron Ranch and helping Thomas with timber cutting and deliveries. His room above the workshop became his own, with small touches appearing a book of poetry that surprised Olivia, a handsome hunting knife displayed on the simple dresser, a wolf pelt carefully tanned and preserved. "You kept it," Olivia observed one evening when she brought fresh linens up to his room and saw the pelt. Garrett, who had been reading by lantern light, stood as she entered. "Seemed wrong to waste it," he explained. "The wolf was only doing what nature intended. Not his fault we encroached on his territory." Olivia set the linens on the bed. "You speak as though you respect them even after what happened." "I do," he said simply. "Wolves mate for life, did you know that? They're loyal to their pack, protect their young fiercely. There's honor in how they live. Yet you killed one without hesitation. To protect you," he said, his voice dropping lower. "Some things are worth killing for." The intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. In that moment, Olivia realized how alone they were, how improper it was for her to be in a man's room unchaperoned. Yet she felt no fear, only a strange, fluttering excitement. "I should go," she said softly. "Dinner will be ready soon." He nodded, maintaining a respectful distance. "Thank you for the linens." As April turned to May, the wild spring beauty of the Sierra Nevada foothills blossomed around Verde. Wildflowers carpeted the meadows, and the days grew consistently warmer. Garrett continued to escort Olivia to and from school most days, and their conversations grew longer and more personal. She learned he had fought for the Union during the war, though he spoke little of his experiences. He had drifted westward afterward, working as a cowhand, sometimes a scout, occasionally as a lawman in small frontier towns. He told her about the vast open ranges of Montana, the towering mountains of Colorado, the stark beauty of the Arizona desert. In turn, Olivia shared stories of growing up in Nevada as it transformed from wilderness to territory to state. She told him about her dreams of someday starting a proper academy where girls could receive education equal to boys, her love of literature, and her determination to live life on her own terms. "You're different from other women I've known," Garrett remarked one afternoon as they walked along the river that ran near the Parker property. It was Saturday, and Olivia had invited him to join her for what she called her thinking walks. "How so?" she asked, pausing to pick a wildflower. "Most women I've met either want to change a man entirely or expect him to be something he's not," he said thoughtfully. "You seem to accept people as they are, yet still challenge them to be better." Olivia twirled the flower between her fingers. "Is that what I do with you, Mr. Zimmerman? Challenge you to be better? You make me want to be better," he replied, the simple honesty in his voice catching her by surprise. Before she could respond, they heard hoofbeats approaching. Turning, they saw Samuel riding toward them at a gallop. "Livy, Mr. Zimmerman," he called, reining his horse to a stop beside them. "Pa sent me to find you. There's trouble in town. The wolf pack attacked a family on the North Road, killed their livestock, and mauled their son pretty bad." Garrett's expression hardened. "When?" "This morning. Sheriff's forming a hunting party. Pa thought you might want to join, being an experienced tracker and all." Garrett nodded grimly. "I'll get my rifle." "I'm coming with you," Olivia declared. Both men stared at her in surprise. "To town," she clarified. "The boy who was injured is at Tommy Wilson. He's one of my students." Samuel nodded. "Doc's treating him at their place." "Then I should be there," Olivia said firmly. "His parents will be distraught, and Tommy will need familiar faces when he wakes." Garrett looked like he might argue, but then gave a short nod. "We'll drop you in town before we join the hunting party." By the time they reached Verde, the main street was crowded with men preparing to hunt the wolf pack. Rifles were being checked, horses saddled, provisions packed. Sheriff Davis, a stocky man with a thick mustache, was giving instructions from the steps of his office. The pack was last seen heading into the eastern foothills. He was saying as Garrett, Olivia, and Samuel approached. "They've killed 3 cows at the Henderson place and nearly killed young Tommy Wilson. Doc says the boy might lose his arm." A murmur of anger went through the crowd. Wolf attacks on humans were rare, but when they did occur, the response was always swift and merciless. "Zimmerman," the sheriff acknowledged with a nod as he spotted Garrett. "Heard you're good with a rifle and know something about tracking." "I can help," Garrett confirmed. "Good. We're splitting into 3 groups to cover more ground. You'll go with Harrison's men from the Silver Baron." He nodded toward a group of cowboys checking their weapons nearby. As Garrett moved to join them, Olivia touched his arm briefly. "Be careful," she said quietly. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. "I will," he promised. Olivia made her way to the Wilson home, where she found Mrs. Wilson red-eyed from crying, keeping vigil at her son's bedside while Doc Stevens changed the bandages on Tommy's savaged arm. "Miss Parker," Mrs. Wilson said with visible relief, "Tommy's been asking for you when he's conscious." "How is he?" Olivia asked, moving to the bedside. "He's young and strong," Doc Stevens answered. "The wounds are deep, but if infection doesn't set in, he should keep the arm. Won't have full use of it, though." Tommy, pale and sweating with fever, opened his eyes. "Miss Parker," he whispered. "I'm here, Tommy," she said, taking his uninjured hand. "You're going to be all right. The wolves," he mumbled. "They came so fast. Pa tried to shoot them, but there were too many." "Don't worry about that now," she soothed. "The men are going to make sure those wolves can't hurt anyone else." As darkness fell, the hunting parties returned to town empty-handed. The wolves had vanished into the wilderness, leaving only tracks and the occasional glimpse to show they were still in the area. Garrett found Olivia still at the Wilson home, where she had spent the day helping care for Tommy and supporting his distraught parents. "Any luck?" she asked when he appeared at the door, his expression grim. He shook his head. "We tracked them to a canyon in the eastern foothills, but lost the trail when a storm came through. We're heading out again at first light." Mrs. Wilson, overhearing, approached them. You'll kill them all, won't you, Mr. Zimmerman? Every last one of those monsters. Garrett met her eyes steadily. Yes, madam, they can't be allowed to develop a taste for human blood. That night, as Garrett rode with Olivia back to the Parker homestead, a heavy silence hung between them. You're troubled, Olivia observed as they approached the house. Garrett sighed. Killing wolves for threatening you was one thing. They were acting on instinct, hungry in a hard season. But what happened to that boy? That's different. Once wolves start seeing humans as prey, there's no choice but to hunt them down. You still respect them, even now. Respect doesn't mean I won't do what needs to be done, he said. Sometimes the hardest decisions are the right ones. Olivia sensed he was speaking about more than just wolves. What happened during the war, Garrett? She asked gently, using his first name for the first time. He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. I was a sharpshooter, he finally said, his voice low. Got good at killing men from a distance, so good they gave me commendations for it. His hands tightened on the reins. Hard to feel proud of that kind of skill. Olivia reached across the space between them, placing her hand on his arm. You were serving your country, maybe, but after a while the faces start to haunt you, men who never knew what hit them, never had a chance to defend themselves. He shook his head. That's why I came west afterward. Needed open spaces, needed to use my skills for something that felt clean. Like protecting a schoolteacher from wolves, she said softly. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Like that. They had reached the homestead. Thomas stood on the porch, waiting for news. No luck today, Garrett called as they approached. We're heading out again tomorrow. Thomas nodded grimly. I'll join you. Can't have those beasts threatening our children. For 3 more days, the men of Verde and the surrounding ranches hunted the wolf pack without success. The creatures seemed to have learned caution, moving only at night and staying in the most rugged terrain. On the 4th day, as Olivia was dismissing her students, a commotion in the street drew her attention. The hunting party was returning, and from the triumphant calls, they had been successful. Her heart racing, Olivia stepped outside to see Garrett riding at the front of the group, several wolf carcasses tied across the backs of pack horses behind them. Got them all, Sheriff Davis announced to the gathering crowd. Every last one. Zimmerman here tracked them to their den in Devil's Canyon. Wouldn't have found it without him. Garrett's expression was solemn despite the congratulations being heaped upon him. When his eyes met Olivia's across the street, she saw no triumph there, only a quiet resignation. Later, after the celebration at the saloon had died down, Garrett walked Olivia home in the gathering dusk. You don't seem as pleased as the others, she observed. Taking life should never be cause for celebration, he replied. Even when necessary. They walked in silence for a while, the spring evening warm around them. I've been offered a permanent position at the Silver Baron, Garrett said suddenly. Foreman of the North Pasture. Olivia felt her heart leap. That's wonderful news. Will you accept? He stopped walking, turning to face her. That depends. On what? On whether there's a reason for me to stay in Verde. His eyes held hers, the question in them unmistakable. Olivia felt her breath catch. And if there was, Garrett took a step closer. Olivia, I came west looking for something I couldn't name. I think I've found it here. And what is that? She whispered. Peace. Purpose. He hesitated, then added softly, and if I'm not mistaken, someone who sees me for who I am, not just what I've done. Olivia felt a warmth spread through her chest. You're not mistaken. Slowly, giving her every chance to step away, Garrett leaned down and brushed his lips against hers. The kiss was gentle, questioning, and over almost before it began. I should ask your father's permission to court you properly, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Yes, you should, Olivia agreed, her own voice not entirely steady. though I believe he's already quite fond of you." That evening, as the Parker family sat down to dinner with Garrett, Thomas raised his glass in a toast. "To the man who rid our valley of those wolves and saved my daughter twice over." Garrett accepted the toast with a humble nod. After the meal, he asked to speak with Thomas privately. They retired to the porch, where the conversation was too quiet for Olivia to hear from inside. But when they returned, her father was smiling broadly, and Garrett looked both relieved and pleased. "Well, daughter," Thomas announced, "it seems Mr. Zimmerman has asked permission to court you properly, and I've given my blessing." His eyes twinkled. "Though I suspect you'd have had something to say if I hadn't." Olivia felt her cheeks flush, but she couldn't suppress her smile. "Thank you, Papa." As spring gave way to summer, Garrett settled into his role at the Silver Baron Ranch while continuing to help Thomas with larger timber projects. His room above the workshop remained his, though now he took most of his meals with the Parker family and attended church with them on Sundays, much to the interest of the Verde townsfolk. The courtship proceeded with proper decorum in public, though Olivia and Garrett found moments for more private conversations during rides in the hills or walks along the river. They discovered a shared love of literature. Garrett had been educated before the war and carried books in his saddlebags during his years of wandering. They debated politics, shared dreams, and gradually revealed more of their pasts to each other. "Have you ever been in love before?" Olivia asked one afternoon as they sat by the river, chaperoned at a distance by Samuel, who was more interested in fishing than watching his sister. Garrett considered the question. "Once, before the war. Her name was Eliza, but I came back different and she had already married someone else." He skipped a stone across the water. "Looking back, it was for the best. We were too young to know what we wanted." "And now?" Olivia asked, her heart beating faster. "Do you know what you want now?" He turned to her, his eyes serious. "I do. I want a home, not just a place to sleep. I want purpose beyond the next paycheck. And I want someone to share it with who understands that the past shapes us but doesn't have to define us." Olivia reached for his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "I want those things too." In July, young Tommy Wilson returned to school, his arm still in a sling but healing well. He regarded Garrett with something approaching hero worship, and soon other children in town were looking up to the quiet cowboy who had saved their friend and rid the valley of the dangerous wolves. "You're becoming quite respected in town," Olivia teased one evening as they sat on the porch after dinner, Thomas having discreetly retreated inside to give them a few minutes alone. "Not sure I deserve it," Garrett replied. "Just did what needed doing." "That's precisely why they respect you," she pointed out. "You don't seek recognition, yet you stand up when it matters." He was quiet for a moment. "I've been thinking about the future, Olivia." Her pulse quickened. "Oh." "Harrison's offered to sell me a parcel of land on the eastern edge of the Silver Baron property. Good grazing land with a stream running through it, enough to start a small ranch of my own." "That sounds like a wonderful opportunity," she said carefully, not wanting to presume. Garrett turned to face her directly. "I've been saving most of my wages. Between that and what I had put aside before, I could build a proper house by winter." He took a deep breath. "It wouldn't be grand, but it would be a home, our home if you wanted it to be." Olivia felt tears spring to her eyes. "Are you proposing, Garrett Zimmerman?" He smiled, a rare full smile that transformed his face. "I believe I am, Olivia Parker." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. "I rode to Reno last week to get this." Inside was a simple gold ring with a small diamond that caught the last rays of the setting sun. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Is that a yes?" he asked, his confidence faltering slightly. Olivia laughed through her tears. "Yes, absolutely yes." The kiss they shared then was deeper than their first, filled with promise and a future taking shape between them. The wedding took place in September, when the aspen trees in the mountains were turning to gold. The entire town of Verdi turned out for the celebration, held in the meadow behind the Parker homestead. Olivia wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully altered and adorned with fresh wildflowers. Garrett, almost unrecognizable in a new black suit, stood tall beside the preacher, watching with wonder as Thomas walked his daughter toward him. "Never thought I'd see the day Zimmerman would settle down," Sheriff Davis commented to Harrison, the owner of the Silver Baron. Man had drifter written all over him when he rode into town. Harrison nodded thoughtfully. Sometimes a man just needs the right reason to put down roots. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. Garrett and Olivia exchanged vows beneath an arch of autumn flowers, their voices clear and sure as they promised to cherish each other through whatever life brought their way. "I was lost until I found you," Garrett said in his vows, his voice carrying across the hushed gathering. "You saw past what I was to what I could be. I promise to spend every day becoming the man you deserve." Olivia, her eyes shining with tears, responded, "You came into my life when I needed you most, not just to save me from wolves, but to show me that strength and gentleness can exist in the same heart. I promise to walk beside you, not behind you, as we build our future together." The celebration afterward lasted well into the night, with music and dancing, abundant food and flowing drink. As darkness fell, lanterns illuminated the meadow, and the stars emerged overhead in the clear Nevada sky. "Mrs. Zimmerman," Garrett murmured in Olivia's ear as they danced. "How does it sound?" "Wonderful," she replied, leaning against him. "Though my students will still call me Miss Parker until the end of the term to avoid confusion," he chuckled. "Always the practical teacher." "Speaking of practical," she said, her eyes twinkling, "when do we leave for our new home?" "The house won't be finished for another month," he reminded her. "Your father's been kind enough to offer us the main guest room until then. And our wedding trip to San Francisco." "2 days from now," he confirmed. "The stagecoach is booked and rooms reserved at the Grand Hotel for a week." Olivia sighed contentedly, resting her head against his chest as they swayed to the music. From wolves to wedding bells in 5 months, life certainly can change quickly. "For the better," Garrett added, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. As promised, their wedding journey to San Francisco was a week of wonder and discovery, both of the bustling city with its grand buildings and diverse population, and of each other as husband and wife. They visited the theater, dined in fine restaurants, walked along the bay, and spent lazy mornings in their hotel room, learning the contours of each other's bodies and hearts. Upon their return to Verdi, they settled temporarily into the Parker homestead, while the finishing touches were put on their own house, a sturdy 2-story structure on the land Garrett had purchased from Harrison. Every day after his work at the ranch, Garrett would ride to the property to work alongside the builders, determined that everything would be perfect for Olivia. Finally, in late October, the house was ready. Furnished with a combination of wedding gifts, items Olivia had collected over the years, and pieces Garrett had commissioned from a craftsman in Carson City. It was exactly what they had dreamed of, cozy yet spacious enough for the family they hoped to have. The day they moved in, snow was threatening in the gray sky. Thomas, Samuel, and several hands from the Silver Baron helped transport their belongings from the Parker homestead to the new Zimmerman ranch. "What will you call this place?" Harrison asked as they unloaded the last of the furniture from the wagons. Garrett looked at Olivia, who smiled. "We thought Wolf Creek Ranch," she answered. "It seemed fitting." Harrison nodded approvingly. "Good name. Reminds me the new rifles you ordered came in yesterday, Zimmerman. I'll have one of the boys bring them out tomorrow. Rifles? Olivia questioned after Harrison had left. Garrett nodded. For protection. This is still wild country, despite how settled it's becoming. He glanced toward the eastern hills where the wolf pack had once roamed. And I'll not risk losing what I've found here. That night, after the last of their helpers had departed, and they were truly alone in their new home for the first time, Garrett built a fire in the stone fireplace while Olivia prepared a simple supper in their kitchen. It feels surreal, she admitted as they sat together at the table. A few months ago, I was resigned to being the spinster schoolteacher of Verdi. Now I'm a rancher's wife. Having second thoughts, Garrett asked, only half joking. Olivia reached across the table for his hand. Not for a moment. Though I do intend to continue teaching, at least until we start our family. I wouldn't have it any other way, he assured her. Your students need you and you love the work. After supper they sat before the fire, Olivia nestled against Garrett's chest, his arms around her. Outside, the first snowflakes of the season began to fall, dusting the new ranch with white. You ever think about them? Olivia asked softly. The wolves. Garrett was quiet for a moment. Sometimes, they were just following their nature, desperate after a hard winter. His arms tightened around her. But I'd make the same choice again to keep you safe. I know, she said, turning to look up at him. That's one of the many reasons I love you, Garrett Zimmerman. You do what's necessary, but you don't take it lightly. As winter settled over Wolf Creek Ranch, Olivia and Garrett fell into the rhythms of married life. She continued teaching at the Verdi schoolhouse, riding to town on a mare Garrett had trained especially for her, while he divided his time between his foreman duties at the Silver Baron and developing their own property. They planted an apple orchard, built corrals, and acquired a small herd of cattle to start their own operation. In the evenings, they would read aloud to each other by lamplight, discuss their days, and make plans for the future. On Sundays, they attended church in Verdi and often took dinner with the Parkers afterward. It was during one such Sunday dinner in February that Olivia made an announcement that brought joy to both families. We're expecting a child, she told them, her hand clasped firmly in Garrett's. In late August, according to Doc Stevens. Thomas's eyes filled with tears as he embraced his daughter, then shook Garrett's hand vigorously. Martha immediately began making plans for baby clothes and quilts, while Samuel teased that he was too young to be called uncle. That night, as they lay in bed listening to the winter wind outside, Garrett placed a gentle hand on Olivia's still flat stomach. I never thought I'd have this, he confessed, his voice hushed with wonder. A wife, a home, a child on the way. After the war, I didn't think I deserved such happiness. Olivia covered his hand with her own. Everyone deserves happiness, Garrett, even former sharpshooters who talk to wolves, he chuckled, pulling her closer. I don't talk to wolves. But you understand them, she countered. Just as you understand me. As Olivia's pregnancy progressed through spring and into summer, Garrett became increasingly protective. He insisted on driving her to and from school in the buggy he had purchased, worried about her riding as her condition advanced. He hired additional hands for the ranch so he could spend more time at home, and he enlisted Harrison's wife to help prepare the nursery in their house. By July, Olivia had reluctantly agreed to take a leave from teaching until after the baby was born. The summer heat made her uncomfortable, and her energy waned as the child grew within her. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching a thunderstorm roll across the valley, Olivia suddenly gasped and pressed a hand to her side. "What is it?" Garrett asked, immediately alert. She smiled, taking his hand and placing it where she had felt the movement. "Wait." A moment later, he felt a distinct push against his palm from within Olivia's rounded belly. "That's our child," she whispered, watching his face. Garrett's expression transformed with awe. "Strong," he murmured, "like their mother." The baby came 3 weeks earlier than expected, on a hot August night when the moon was full. Garrett rode frantically for Doc Stevens while Martha Parker, who had been visiting, stayed with Olivia as her labor began. The birth was difficult and long, lasting through the night and into the following day. Garrett paced outside the bedroom door, flinching at every cry of pain from his wife, feeling utterly helpless. "First babies often take their time," Thomas tried to reassure him as they waited. Martha was in labor for 20 hours with Olivia. Finally, as the afternoon sun slanted through the windows, a new cry pierced the air, the unmistakable wail of a newborn taking its first breath. Doc Stevens opened the door, his face tired but smiling. "Congratulations, Zimmerman. You have a son." Garrett entered the bedroom on unsteady legs. Olivia lay against the pillows, exhausted but radiant, a small bundle cradled in her arms. Martha was cleaning up, and the room smelled of blood and sweat, but all Garrett could see was his wife and child. "Come meet your son," Olivia said softly. He approached the bed, sitting carefully on the edge. Olivia tilted the bundle toward him, revealing a tiny red face with a shock of dark hair. "He has your coloring," she observed, "and your strong jaw, I think." Garrett reached out a tentative finger, touching the baby's cheek with a gentleness few would have believed possible from his weathered hands. "He's perfect," he whispered. "What shall we call him?" They had discussed names but hadn't settled on one. Now, looking at her son's face, Olivia knew. "Thomas," she said, "after my father. Thomas James Zimmerman." Garrett nodded, his throat too tight for words. Little Thomas opened his eyes then, dark blue and unfocused, and Garrett felt something shift permanently inside him, a fierce protectiveness unlike anything he had ever known, even for Olivia. "Hello, Thomas," he managed. "Welcome to Wolf Creek Ranch." The years that followed brought changes to the Zimmerman family and to Verde itself. The completion of the Transcontinental Railroad had made Nevada more accessible, bringing new settlers and businesses. The silver mines continued to produce, and cattle ranching flourished in the valleys. Wolf Creek Ranch prospered under Garrett's careful management. By the time Thomas was 2, they had doubled their cattle herd and added sheep to their operation. Olivia had returned to teaching part-time, bringing young Thomas with her 3 days a week while Martha Parker watched him the other 2. When Thomas was 3, he gained a sister, Elizabeth Martha Zimmerman, named for Garrett's mother and Olivia's. Unlike her brother's difficult birth, Eliza, as they called her, came quickly and easily one spring morning, announcing her arrival with lusty cries that made Doc Stevens laugh. "She's got a voice that'll carry across the ranch," he observed as he handed the swaddled infant to her father. Garrett, no longer the awkward first-time father, cradled his daughter with practiced ease, marveling at her tiny features and the wisp of auburn hair that promised she would favor her mother. "Hello, little one," he murmured. "You're already as beautiful as your mama." As the children grew, so did the legends about how their parents had met. The story of the schoolteacher, the wolves, and the mysterious cowboy with the accurate rifle became a favorite tale in Verde, embellished with each telling until it resembled something from a dime novel. Thomas, energetic and curious, followed his father everywhere on the ranch, soaking up knowledge about cattle and horses, weather and land. By 6, he was riding his own pony and helping with simple chores. Eliza, equally bright but more contemplative, loved books and stories like her mother, but also showed a natural affinity for animals that reminded Garrett of himself. On the 10th anniversary of the night Garrett had saved Olivia from the wolves, they took their children on a picnic to the spot where they had first met. Now 7 and 4, Thomas and Eliza listened wide-eyed as their parents recounted the true version of the story. "Were you scared, Mama?" Eliza asked, her green eyes so like Olivia's wide with wonder. "Terrified," Olivia admitted. "But then your father appeared like a guardian angel with his rifle." "Did you shoot all the wolves, Pa?" Thomas wanted to know. Garrett shook his head. "Just one. Enough to scare the others away and save your mother." "But later you had to hunt them all," Thomas remembered, having heard parts of the story before. "That's right," Garrett said soberly. "Sometimes nature and mankind come into conflict and hard choices must be made." "Do wolves still live in these mountains?" Eliza asked. "Not around Verde anymore," Garrett explained. "But farther north in the wilderness areas, yes. They're part of nature's balance." As they packed up their picnic and prepared to ride home, Olivia slipped her hand into Garrett's. 10 years, she marveled. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday that I was running for my life on this path." He squeezed her hand. "Best night of my life, though I didn't know it then." "Because you got to be a hero," she teased. "Because I found what I'd been searching for without knowing it," he corrected, watching as Thomas helped Eliza onto her pony. "A purpose, a home." He turned to Olivia, the love still evident in his eyes after a decade together. "A family." As they rode back to Wolf Creek Ranch, the setting sun painted the Sierra Nevada mountains gold and crimson. The land that had once seemed so wild and dangerous now felt like the only place they were meant to be. That evening, after the children were asleep, Garrett and Olivia sat on their porch watching the stars emerge, just as they had done countless nights before. "You ever miss it?" Olivia asked suddenly. "The drifting, the freedom of answering to no one." Garrett considered the question seriously, as he always did. "No," he finally answered. "What I thought was freedom was really just running. What I have now, this land, those children sleeping upstairs, you beside me, this is true freedom." Olivia leaned her head against his shoulder, contentment washing over her. "Who would have thought that wolves in the darkness would lead to all this? Providence," Garrett suggested. "Or just plain good luck?" "Either way," Olivia murmured, "I'm grateful every day for that rifle of yours." Garrett chuckled, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. "As am I, Mrs. Zimmerman. As am I." In the years that followed, Wolf Creek Ranch continued to thrive, becoming one of the most respected operations in western Nevada. Thomas and Eliza were joined by another brother, Robert, born when they were 9 and 6. The Zimmerman children grew up knowing the value of hard work, the importance of education, and the power of love to transform lives. Garrett never entirely lost his wariness, the habit of scanning horizons, the careful assessment of strangers, the rifle always within reach. But the restlessness that had driven him for so many years after the war had been replaced by a deep-rooted contentment. And sometimes, on winter nights when the moon was full and the wind carried sounds from the distant mountains, both Garrett and Olivia would think of wolves running free in the wilderness and silently thank them for the chance encounter that had changed their lives forever. As for Verde, it continued to grow and change with the times. The mines eventually played out, but the ranches remained, as did the Zimmerman legacy, a family born from a moment of danger in the darkness, saved by courage, and sustained by love that proved stronger than any force of nature.